I was thinking about the true state of America's economic affairs. And and it dawned on me, as I often say, as the debt burden continues to mount, it is going to be a impossibility for America to continue her escapades, her funding of NGOs to destabilize, overthrow, assassinate, and remove governments and government officials across the world, to deploy her warships on all of the strategic waterways, her military on all of the land borders, and to fly her warcrafts close to everybody's borders. Because a lot of people don't realize this. To do these things, it takes money that the U.S. government does not have, money that the U.S. government must print out of thin air and borrow from the very nations that she's destabilizing, that she's vilifying, and that she's preparing to make war with. I call this crackhead politics or crackhead economics, okay? Because the crackhead thinks that they're smarter than everybody else, but everybody else has become aware of the shell game that they run on people to try to get ahead of people and make everybody believe that they're doing so well, and at the same time, all they're doing, everything that they're doing is going up in smoke. I want to read something to you as I'm talking to you about the economic situation and the dire situation, because what prompted me to actually do the show today, I was thinking about doing it in the morning, and I was thinking about I was 50 on doing it in the morning and just doing another late evening show tomorrow, and 50 about doing like a pre-recorded one and just letting it come out in about an hour or so. But because I wanted to get this message out to you all, I said, you know what, forget that. I'm going straight to the audience. I'm going straight to the people I'm going to talk. And so I want you to listen to this, because I'm looking at this for the first time. This article was written by Michael Snyder of the Economics Collapse blog, and it was published April 30th, which was yesterday. The title of it is called "The System is Starting to Unravel at a Pace That is Absolutely Breathtaking." Now, we are about to read some of this together for the first time. So if it surprises you of what is being said, it surprises me also. I have no heads up on anything. Okay? So let's just start with the title, because titles, sometimes when you do a title, you want to encompass the measure of what you're trying to convey to a person. All right? So let us look at that title before we go further. The system. What system? The rules-based order system. The U.S.-dominated, Western-dominated economic system. The Western-dominated political system. The Western and U.S.-led and dominated geopolitical military hierarchy. Because all of those are interconnected and one and the same. Pedro, you say assalamu alaikum, my cousin, and I say wa alaikum salam to you. So listen to this. The system is starting to unravel at a pace that is absolutely breathtaking. Now, for us to understand exactly what he's trying to convey to us, let's go to the dictionary first, because we need to understand breathtaking. According to Google and Google's dictionary, breathtaking is an adjective. It means astonishing or awe-inspiring in quality, so as to take one's breath away. Spectacular, magnificent, wonderful, awe-inspiring, awesome. So we know that this can't be wonderful if we're looking at the collapse of the world. It cannot be wonderful for those who have benefited from the collapse of the world. It cannot be wonderful for those who have exercised power over the people in the world is collapsing. So it is a spectacular thing that is underway, because we've never witnessed something like this before. It is magnificent because of the magnitude of what is taking place, right? It is awe-inspiring because you'll never live to see something like this happen when one world is being pushed out and another world is coming in. And it is awesome because of the scope and the depths of what is transpiring right in front of your eyes, okay? So I think breathtaking, the definition of breathtaking is what we need to look at and focus on when we are watching the economic decline and collapse of the Western world order. Okay. So check this out. Let's go into this article. Okay. I just dropped something. But it says it should be it excuse me. Let me go down a little bit so I can get the whole article in. Okay. What in the world is this? Okay. Right here. So I want you all, if you have it, you can read along with me, or you can just listen to what is going on. It says, as a picture, it has a finger, a suit, like the arm sleeve of a suit, and it has a finger pointing or touching some dominoes, right, or some pylons. And as one falls over in succession, the rest of them are starting to fall over. So he is trying to convey something, that everything that is interconnected in this system is starting to fall over. And they cannot no longer mask the depths of corruption, the depths of despair, the ingrained racism, exceptionalism, fascism that is in the system, because everything in it is coming out of it. So listen, he says, it should have been apparent to everyone that the dark clouds on the horizon would bring a storm, and now rain is furiously falling all around us. Our entire system is being viciously shaken, and the dominoes are going to continue to fall in the months ahead. Stop right there. Stop right there. So he's talking about the system. Now, because the reason I break this stuff down and the reason I talk to you in such a manner is because other people don't respect you. So they try to talk over you, or they disrespect your level of understanding and your mental capacity. So what I try to do is give you definitions of things, and then we can delve into the sentence, the word structure, the paragraph structure, so that we can get the deeper meaning of what is being conveyed. Because listen to me good. When a lot of these articles are written, even though you may read them, these people sometimes talk to people over you. They talk through you. They're not talking to you, they're talking at you. They're trying to convey a message to somebody that they deem needs this message, so they talk in codes. So if we break the definitions down and we look at the sentence structure and the emphasis on certain words and the paragraph structures, we can get a deeper analysis of what is trying to be conveyed to the people, okay? So let's go further. He says, it should have been apparent to everyone that the dark clouds on the horizon would bring a storm, and now rain is furiously falling all around us. Our entire system is being viciously shaken, and the dominoes are going to continue to fall in the months ahead. One Silicon Valley bank and Signature Bank went down. We all knew that it was just a matter of time before more large banks started to implode. Now First Republic has failed, and over the weekend, U.S. regulators were working very hard to arrange a sale. Stop right there before we go any further. This is showing you that the collapse is systemic. No patchwork, right? No surface dwelling will do. What the Fed and what the U.S. government and what the European government and what the Western elite are trying to do, and I'm going to give you an analogy, because, of course, I'm, by the grace of God, I'm the king of analogies. I love to take that upon myself. Is this: they have found out that their loved ones or themselves have been diagnosed with stage 5 cancer, or stage 4, whichever one. I don't know which one, but let's just say stage 5 cancer, and it's become terminal, right? So they start lashing out on everybody, because they are in this position because of the life they live, because some of this stuff can be brought on by the life that you live, the thoughts that you have, right? And the way that you conduct yourself. And now that they're in this position of life and death, They don't want to accept the diagnosis. They don't want to accept a treatment that may help. So what they do, they go get Band-Aids and put on their skin, thinking that this will stop the internal bleeding. This is what they're doing to the system. There's no structural change. It's only in words. Oh, this. But there's no structural change. Why? Because to have structural change, one would have to go to the very root of the cause and of the disease. Listen, when a doctor or a scientist finds something that is a disease, what do? They isolate that disease, right? And they find out what it feeds upon, what is its tendencies, what does it like, and what does it not like. And then they experiment to try to find out what weakens and what eventually could eradicate the disease. But they have to first isolate it. They cannot allow it to just go rampant, right? So they go to the very heart of it, structural change. America in the West refuses to do this. They are putting Band-Aids on stage 5 cancer. You understand? And it's metastasizing by the day, as we can see more and more bank failures that are underway. As a matter of fact, let me see something real quick before we read a little bit more. Just bear with me, okay? Just bear with me. Let me find this real quick. If they will allow me. Okay, they will allow me. I want to bring something to your attention. Since we are talking about the banks, let me play something for you all. If I can find it. I think it's still on my dashboard. I don't think I erased this. Let's see. All right, here it is right here. To show you just how bad the system is. Now, remember, I've had this on my dashboard long before these articles came out. But I want you to understand, they put this aura of confidence and being in control, when in reality, behind closed doors, they are scared mice. They understand to the depths of what the system has fallen. But they can't tell you, because then you would want to lynch them. You would want to kill them. You would want off with their heads with them. So they continue to string you along, making you believe that everything will be all right. But to do that is to disregard your safety and the lives of your families and the security of you and your family. That is literally in the midst of a hurricane, they're not giving you any warning, even though they know. The winds are blowing. The rain is coming. The winds are starting to pick up, and they're telling you, oh, it's just a 30% chance of rain. So you thinking it's an everyday rainstorm, which will pass. So you go outside and you're doing and then it's a category 5 hits you and wipes you and your family out. This is what they're doing economically, politically, and geopolitically. I want you to listen to this so that you can understand that this just didn't come as a shock to them, okay? Listen to this. Let me play this right here.
I'm watching this one U.S. Senator, Kennedy, talking to this guy from the Fed about the stress test. And one of the things that they're saying up on Capitol Hill, particularly the Democrats, they're saying that the problem was that Silicon Valley Bank was too small to be stress tested, that the largest banks were the banks that were required to pass the Fed's stress tests. And Silicon Valley Bank didn't make the cut. And so this Senator Kennedy is pointing out the truth.
If you had stress tested Silicon Valley Bank in 2022, it wouldn't have made any difference, would it?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, you didn't test for Silicon Valley Bank's problem. I've read your report. You stress tested these 34 banks for falling GDP, spike in unemployment, and defaults in commercial real estate. Isn't that correct?
Yes, in a typical adverse scenario for banks, we're testing falling interest rate
But that
environments.
wasn't our problem in 2022.
I completely
And
agree with
it's
you.
not our problem today. The problem
Yeah.
is inflation, high interest rate, and loss of value in government bonds, isn't it?
I completely agree with you.
So you stress tested in 2022 for the wrong thing.
When these tests were announced, it was like 3 years ago, right? When the Fed came out and they did all these stress tests and they made a big deal in the media because they were promoting, hey, look, the banking system is sound. All of these banks passed our stress test. Hallelujah. We got nothing to worry about. Good thing we got the Fed on the job putting these banks through these rigorous stress tests. And now we could all sleep soundly knowing that all these banks have passed the Fed's stress test. Now, most people probably just, okay, great. The Fed stress tested them and they passed. Nobody bothered to actually look at the assumptions that.
See, they're messing with the thing now. They don't want you to see this. But guess what? We're going to play it again. We're going to make sure that they shut it down openly so that you'll know who's bothering the clips right here. They don't want you to hear these things because remember, they knew what was coming in 2000, 2001, 2002. They're trying to pretend like this is a shock to them right now. They're trying to make you believe that they were unaware and this just happened out of the blue. Deficit spending, military spending, military escapades, defunding education, defunding Head Start. All of these things are elements of the fatal future of the banking system. All of this. It's all interconnected. I want you to listen to this good. And if they mess it up again, we'll try it again because this is very important that you hear this. It's only 3 minutes. So you guys bear with me. I'm not going to let them put this over on you like this. You're not ignorant. You're not stupid. And I'm not going to allow them to talk to you as if you're stupid and ignorant. So I want you to pay close attention to this.
I'm watching this one U.S. Senator, Kennedy, talking to this guy from the Fed about the stress test. And one of the things that they're saying up on Capitol Hill.
They're stopping
I'm
this right
watching
here. We'll
this
go to
one
another
U.S. Senator,
Listen.
Kennedy, talking to this guy from the Fed about the stress test. And one of the things that they're saying up on Capitol Hill, particularly the Democrats, they're saying that the problem was that Silicon Valley Bank was too small to be stress tested, that the largest banks were the banks that were required to pass the Fed's stress tests. And Silicon Valley Bank didn't make the cut. And so this Senator Kennedy is pointing out the truth.
If you had stress tested Silicon Valley Bank in 2022, it wouldn't have made any difference, would it?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, you didn't test for Silicon Valley Bank's problem. I've read your report. Your stress test, you stress tested these 34 banks for falling GDP, spike in unemployment, and defaults in commercial real estate. Isn't that correct?
Yes, in a typical adverse scenario for banks, we're testing falling interest rate
But that
environments.
wasn't our problem in 2022.
I completely agree
and
with
it's
you.
not our problem today. The problem
Yeah.
is inflation, high interest rate, and loss of value in government bonds, isn't it?
I completely agree with you.
So you stress tested in 2022 for the wrong thing.
When these tests were announced, it was like 3 years ago, right? When the Fed came out and they did all these stress tests and they made a big deal in the media because they were promoting, hey, look, the banking system is sound. All of these banks passed our stress test. Hallelujah. We got nothing to worry about. Good thing we got the Fed on the job putting these banks through these rigorous stress tests. And now we could all sleep soundly knowing that all these banks have passed the Fed's stress test. Now, most people probably just, okay, great. The Fed stress tested them and they passed. Nobody bothered to actually look at the assumptions that were in the stress test. I did. I looked at them and I saw that they were testing for the wrong thing. And if you don't believe me, you could just look at Twitter because I happened to pull up this tweet and I retweeted it today. And the original tweet was from June 21st of 2019. This is when they had announced the results of these stress tests. And everybody was lauding the results and how great it was that we had such a sound banking system that all the banks passed. Right. And I said, I'm going to read my own tweet. Right. This is what I said. The Fed's stress tests are worthless. The most adverse scenario assumes both inflation and long-term interest rates fall. During the next recession, both inflation and long-term interest rates will rise. No major bank could survive stagflation. That's why the Fed doesn't test for it. That's it. I nailed this 3 years ago. The idiots at the Fed, and these guys are supposed to be the smart ones, but they were too dumb to see what I tweeted about 3 years ago. And again, I didn't tweet about it because I was so smart. It's just they were that dumb to have missed something so obvious.
So the U.S. government wants you to believe that, oh, this is happening all of a sudden out of the blue. Well, you've just witnessed that they knew about this a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But see, the thing about it is they have to keep this stuff going, or they have to kick the can down the road. They have to try to keep kicking the can down the road. And as I said, Gregory Mannarino personally told on this show that this system, this economic system that's dominated by the West is built upon debt. They must continue to print and they must continue to expand the debt burden. For if it stops, the entire thing will implode. Now, what's significant about that? It is that at one time, this may have not been such a bad problem for the West, but they have alienated China, Russia, Venezuela, Iran, and the list goes on. So the people who once invested their currency and their wealth in U.S. treasuries are finding alternatives to it. The people who was once so dependent upon the SWIFT system are now building something outside of the SWIFT system to compete with and then eventually trump the SWIFT system. But this is because of Americans' intransigence and Western arrogance. This is what I'm saying. This is all at their own doing. And so the system is being found out to be nothing but a parasitic, debt-mongering system. This is why you see them in every area of the globe. They want to tell you that they're over there protecting freedom. But in reality, they're over there to hold a gun to the head of those nations that would trade outside of the dollar. Those nations that would do bilateral trade agreements and bilateral currency agreements. So if I have 12 aircraft carrier fleets, why do I have 12 aircraft carrier fleets? Not including the smaller helicopter carrier fleets. It is to project power. But why do you need to project power around the world after the collapse of the Soviet Union? It is because you want to dominate all of the strategic pipelines, all of the strategic land routes, all of the strategic waterways, and be able to provoke anywhere in the air. That is to keep everybody off guard, everybody worrying about your next move so that you can make strides in maintaining the dollar-based system. Everybody is belligerent, everybody is aggressive, but the aggressive one who is very belligerent towards everybody else. Okay? I want you to just bear with me. Let's go into the article a little bit more, okay? Because we only read just a paragraph of it. So let's go a little further. U.S. regulators have been trying to clinch a sale of First Republic over the weekend, with roughly half a dozen banks bidding, sources said on Saturday, in what is likely to be the third major U.S. bank to fail in 2 months. Guggenheim Securities is advising the FDIC, two sources familiar with the matter said on Saturday. As I write this article, that still hasn't happened yet, but it could happen at any moment. But when a sale is finally announced, the FDIC is also expected to tell us that it has seized First Republic. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corp is expected to announce a deal on Sunday night before Asian markets open, with the regulator likely to say that at the same time that it has seized the lender, three sources previously told Reuters. Now, Reuters is a British-based so-called news organization, but it does do a lot of propagandizing, okay? But let's go further. They are trying to time everything so that as little panic as possible is created. Stop right there. So we hear that they're trying to do this before Asian markets were to open, right? Right. And then after that, we hear that they're trying to do everything. They're coordinating these things as to create as little panic as possible. Why? Because if there's panic that there's a bank failure and that there may be more, and then this thing goes deeper than what they're acknowledging, then guess what happens? Capital is quickly pulled out of the banks. More banks go belly up. There's a bank run, and the system goes into a tailspin outside of what powers that the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government has to manage this. Because when foreign investors start running for the borders, American law cannot prevent them from running for the borders. And if America were to enact draconian laws and state that, hey, we are going to stop all depositors from transferring their assets out of the country, guess what happens? This puts more fear and doubt in the stability of the dollar and the U.S. economy and the Western economic system. You see, a catch-22. This is what's going on. And Pedro says, and this is why they are so afraid of the Chinese Belt and Road project, the reopening of the old Silk Road. Let me highlight. I want to highlight that because that is a very pertinent point right there. That is a very pertinent point right there. We'll highlight this. And this is why they are so afraid of the Chinese Belt and Road project, the reopening of the old Silk Road. And as a matter of fact, let me bring something up on the screen for you all, okay, for a second. Let me see if I can do this. Give me a second, but sometimes things just don't work out the way I'm trying to. All right, let me see. This map should be sufficient right here. And let me try to bring this map up. Give me 1 second, everybody. Because I got a list, I got a whole bunch of maps over here, and I'm trying to see which one would suit you guys real quick. So let's see. I think this will be the one. Oh, let's see. Yeah, this will be good right here. I think this is good enough right here. All right, this should come up on the screen in just a second. All right, here we are. If you look here, the highlighted map in what is peach or pink or a little dull orange or whatever, that is Sudan, right? And if you look to its southern border, that is South Sudan, right? And then if you look to its east, you see Ethiopia, Eritrea, you see Yemen, you see Djibouti, you see Somalia. If you look up to its northeastern, you see Arabia. If you look up north, you see Egypt. If you look to the northwest, you see Libya. The west, you see Chad. You see to the southwest, you see Car. Now, what's significant about that and all of this stuff here? It's because these nations had some interest in dealing with China and Russia. These nations also are very important, not just to the American government, but to the so-called Western Alliance. And all of these nations are under some kind of burden from the West. If you look at Egypt, I remember Richard Nixon said when he was president, he said, if we lose Egypt, we lose the Middle East. That's what Richard Nixon said. Clause on Egypt. But Egypt is applying to become a BRICS Plus member. This has everything to do with the banking system. This has everything to do with dollar hegemony. If we look to the northwest, we see Libya. Look what they have done to Libya, the most prosperous nation on the Mediterranean. Again, I might add, there are European nations that reside on the Mediterranean. But the UN report on Libya prior to it being destroyed by the West was that it was the most prosperous nation on the Mediterranean. You understand? How could this be allowed, an African country, to be the most prosperous nation on the Mediterranean? This breaks all of the racism and stereotypes. We've got to bomb them back to the Stone Age. And now look at what Libya did. It's in shambles while the West siphons off oil and gas at pennies on the dollar. Chad, the French, the British, the Canadians, the Germans, they've all destabilized Chad. And they're trying to do the same that they did to Sudan by balkanizing it. If you look at remember, if you go back to a show we did months ago, the Central African Republic, the French bombed the only production facility in the entire country. They bombed it and then denied that it was bombed, but radars picked up NATO, the bombs that only NATO had. And the French were present, and they were mad that Carr was asking them to leave the country because they had been a destabilizing force. They bombed the only manufacturing plant there. Go back and look. Google it. Google this, okay? Go down, you go around, look at Sudan, South Sudan, which was a part of Sudan, which Sudan in full size with South Sudan was just shortly 3/4 of the size of the United States, Sudan. And they wanted Darfur because of all of the untapped resources. But they couldn't get Darfur. So now they're getting Sudan. Why? Because Sudan agreed to host a Russian naval facility. Now, if you look here along the waterways, you see something say the Red Sea. Well, south of the Red Sea, south of the name of Djibouti, is the Arabian Sea, right? All right? I'm serious. I want you to look at this. The Gulf of Aden and the Arabian Sea is down there. This is a strategic trading area. America already had bases in Djibouti, illegal bases in Somalia. She is occupying her, Great Britain, and Israel. They're occupying the strategic island in the middle of that area right there that is owned by the Yemeni people and the Yemeni nation. So they are destabilizing the whole region. Why? To try to offset the decline of the dollar. It's tied to the banking system. But listen, if you do these things, you alienate the very people that you want to accept your currency, that you want to accept your democracy and your so-called values. You know how the Western world likes to put on people their values, right? And I'm going to tell you why this is very important that America destabilizes Ethiopia. Remember what's going on in Ethiopia? Ethiopia is fighting an intense civil war, right? Somalia. America is there, right there. If you look to Yemen, they're there. They're in they're in Arabia, excuse me. They're destabilizing Eritrea, right? Why are they in these areas? These main nations of Somalia, Djibouti, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Eritrea, Sudan, and Egypt. Why? Because of the water routes. Look at it. I want you to look good at the water route. And let me see if I can find a better one for you. All right, there you see it. The Gulf of Aden or Aden, and right up to the Red Sea through the Suez Canal. And then you're in the Mediterranean. This waterway. This is what is going on to try to keep dollar hegemony. This is what they do. They destabilize nations. And listen, when they do these things, they start crying and moaning about the influx of refugees in Europe. They don't tell you the reason for the influx of refugees, because these people are destabilizing these nations, uprooting and assassinating government officials and governments, and destroying infrastructure to try to maintain their way of life at the cost of everybody else's livelihood and happiness. Look at the waterway up there. Just look good. The Arabian Gulf enters into what? The Gulf of Aden, the Arabian Sea enters into the Gulf of Aden to the Red Sea, and the Red Sea pours out into what? The Mediterranean. It's no coincidence. And all of this is happening, right, at a time when America is under tremendous debt burdens. And she's trying to mask her debt burden. But this is not an escapade that is being carried out by America alone. It is all of her colleagues in the Western world that are a part of this. You understand? They keep this hidden from you, but we'll reveal it for you. Okay? So let's go further. All right. As a matter of fact, we're going to play clips to prove to you what I'm saying about this. All right. Let's go. Since we're on this, let's go into a couple of short clips. Now, listen to this part. This is 1 minute and 20 seconds. I got 2 clips that's 1 minute and 20 some seconds. I want you to pay close attention. It is very important that you listen to what is being said here. And then while you're listening, make that gray matter click and connect the dots, okay? I want you to pay close attention.
2 generals, the head of the RISM or the Rapid Support Force, and the actual military. I think there's some outside influences. I don't know if the other guest, the brother from Kenya, mentioned that, but at the root of Sudan's ongoing conflagration between the 2 opposing militaries is regional powers. Sudan is at the kind of crossroad between Africa and the Middle East. Its strategic value, it manifests itself in terms of connections, including in terms of commerce, in terms of trade, culture, and in terms of its strategic value to the region. And I'm reading this right now, as a research paper published by the Elliott School of International Affairs last year said, after failing for years to decisively woo the former president who was overthrown, Omar Bashir, to their axis, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia took advantage of the revolutionary uprising of 2018, 2019 to bring Sudan under their influence.
Now, when you hear that, you would think it's the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia that's calling the shots here. Who is Saudi Arabia truly beholden to, and the United Arab Emirates? Because remember that these nations were made up. There was never a book in history written about Lawrence of Saudi Arabia. It was Lawrence of Arabia. It was the Brits, the French, and the U.S. who put those people. They were bandits. I'm not vilifying, demonizing, or lying on anyone. The House of Saud were bandits. They were desert bandits. They would rape, pillage, rob, steal, and kill. And they struck a deal with the Brits. And the U.S. came and became involved, and the French became involved. And that's how they ascended to power in Arabia. And then they put their name, their stamp over the entire nation and started calling it Saudi Arabia. Now look, prior to them coming into power, look at the name of the nation prior to them coming into power. It was Arabia. Okay? All right? And it was called the Arabian Peninsula at points, not the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. Okay? We know that the United Arab Emirates is beholden to, okay, I'm not going to even mention names because it may get me thrown off of YouTube. So this video knocked down or whatever. So I have to be very, very strategic, I should say, in what I say, okay? Now, Sudan. is very strategic. It is very rich. Now, is it ironic or coincidence that right before the outbreak of hostility between the armed forces of Sudan and the RSF forces, that the U.S. sent an ambassador there to lobby against them going through with a deal with Russia on the naval facility? And even in Washington, they were asked about it and said that they would strongly advise Sudan to think through this and not do it. And it wasn't a week later or days later when the Sudanese government and military said that they were going to go through it, that the RSF out the blue started the civil war in Sudan. Now, am I bagging either side? I'm just telling you facts, okay? What you can just Google and pick up. You better Google it before they take it off Google. You understand? So it is no coincidence. Why was that such a big problem there? Why? Because then you would have a Russian naval base in Syria, 2 of them, right? Multiple air bases in Syria, right? You would have a logistical center, a Russian logistical port in Egypt. You would have a Russian naval facility in Sudan. You will have a Chinese naval base in Djibouti that offsets what the U.S. is trying to do by holding that region to the barrel of a gun. And that is unacceptable to American power, unacceptable to American intransigence and American elitism. That's unacceptable. So the destabilization of Sudan now check this out. If these people were to flow over into Europe, then you would say we have a migrant problem. But you never go to the core of what causes the migrants to flow over there. Is it the migrants that are destabilizing their governments? No. Are the migrants the ones bombing their country? No. What America in the West does, they train these people, they bribe certain elements and then promise them certain power. And then they give, when the time is right, they give them the go-ahead, they bag them, they fund them, they arm them, and then these people carry out atrocious crimes against humanity. And then when the people start fleeing the country and they are fleeing to Europe, Europe gets pissed, start talking about a migrant and immigration problem, but they never get to the core of why there is one. You can never stop the crisis if you never deal with the core problem. You must isolate the problem. Remember, isolate the disease and work on the disease. The migrant crisis is not the problem. It's the people who are dominating geopolitics, which are causing the migrants to flee to Europe. If Europe goes back within its own borders and deals with Europe, the unemployment, the defunding of education, the growing crime, the growing inability of the people who want to make a living there, who can't find jobs or well-paying jobs, who have to choose between paying their bills or paying for drugs or paying for food. If the European leaders would go back to Europe and put their bases there, and let Africa and Asia and Latin America solve their own problems, then maybe the flow of migrants would stop. Because guess what? That's the only solution that Europe is not willing to go for. That's the only one. Why? Because Africa has been the mammary gland of the Western world to suck off cheap resources, to take the brain power of those who are learned. You got to stop this. You got to address these things. I was listening to a show the other day, and Jim Willey was on that show. The author of Golden Jackass, that website. And I cannot think of the show. If I knew the show, I would give credit to the show for having him on there. But he was talking about how Africa is becoming a power unto its own. And then he was talking about the inflow of migrants across the U.S. border from Mexico through Mexico, excuse me, not from Mexico, but from Mexico and Latin America, inflowing up through the United States. And he says that I believe the state was Maine. I could be wrong. I believe he said Maine, or it could be Rhode Island. He said there are 10,000 Somali refugees there, and then he says this, that are living on welfare in that state. Now, here's something. First of all, and then he brought up some other stuff. And I listened. I didn't get offended to what he was saying, but I knew he was saying it from a skewed perspective. You understand? And sometimes when people talk, they're very intelligent, but sometimes intelligent people can say ignorant things. And so you have to be mindful enough to siphon through and discern what is good and what is garbage. Okay, now let's go to something. Let's address that. Now, why are the migrants flowing up through Mexico into the United States? Huh? American history tells us that America views Latin America as its own backyard and has overthrown governments and put in, like Pinochet, one of the most brutal leaders in Chile. These brutal leaders that come up, these are American trained leaders. They become brutal to the people there. And their only thing is to get crumbs off the table after the empire takes the pie. They're hoping crumbs fall down. Now, the effects of this reverberates across the region and across the globe. When you destabilize governments to steal off or to get a bigger share of resources and to ignore the people, it is to show contempt towards national sovereignty, culture, their religion, their race, right? And the will of the people. So if you go into Brazil and overthrow the Lula because he was going towards the east, and then you overthrow the Argentine government and put the vice president in jail too, and then you overthrow the Honduran president at one time, then you do the Panamanian government like that, and you so on and so forth, the Peruvian government, the Bolivian government, and then the people, the area becomes destabilized, and these people going for where they think is better because it's more stable. How can you fault those people for doing that? Because it's your policies that enacted these motions, from that any action will receive a equal or greater reaction. These are the laws of science. In America and the West believe that they are the exception to even the very laws of science, which God put in place. If you didn't destabilize, overthrow African leaders and governments and train one faction and arm them against the other faction, and if you just dealt with the problems at home, you wouldn't have an influx of migrants. Matter of fact, let's go a little further, okay? All right. So listen to this.
The destabilization of the East African region has been mainly backed by the interference of foreign interests, mainly the United States backers in the region, has caused a lot of problems. If we talk about the war in Somalia and the war that is going around Eritrea, not just Eritrea, but Ethiopia, and now we have the war that is underway, that is going in Sudan. Mainly is the imperialist interests that are, interested to take up, the minerals in the African land, and they actually are mainly driven by the forces in, the forces. And now we even have Zionist forces and reactionary Arab government that continue to interfere with the stability of the Sudan region. And we have been able to try and find out if this really, indeed, will favor the majority of the Sudanese people. And for us, in our own analysis, this can only lead to the loss of more lives.
Okay. All right.
So you hear them even in Nairobi, Kenya, they're telling you that these wars are being enacted by extra-regional players, meaning that the Western world is doing this, superpowers are doing this, so that they can keep a grasp or hold over the resources of those areas. If I cause you to fight me, if I cause you to fight that person over there, and I arm this person against you, and I tell them how much they hate you, and then I get that person to do the same, and I arm them, and you go at it, I can step in and offer you a solution that's beneficial more to me than to either one of you guys. And this is what the West has been doing. No one wants to talk about that. You talk about the symptoms of the disease, but you never want to talk about the disease itself and how the disease appeared, what caused it.